Traveling the Vortex.
All hail, our robot explorers! It's space exploration made easy with the all-new Mechanoid, the ultimate multi-purpose robotic tool. Landing site needs cleaning? Send in the Mechanoids. Planetary surface needs terraforming? The Mechanoids can do it in half the time. City construction? Well, the Mechanoids can do that too. Now programmed with a new variety vocal package. Select the voice, sit back, and relax as the Mechanoid keeps you up to date with all what's happening in your new colony world. We've joined the Doctor as he travels the Vortex and landed episode number 263. I'm Keith.
I'm Sean.
I'm Glenn.
How are you enjoying your new robots?
Well, mine's on the fritz, but what else is new?
Mine's off exploring.
Mine locked me in a room and fed me bananas for a week. I had to burn the house down.
Robot overlord, then. Well, then, should we move on to news? Our first bit of news is Doctor Who has made the shortlist for the drama category in the 2016 National Television Awards. Congratulations! So, on January 20th, the award show will take place. It is going up against Downton Abbey, which saw its final episode top the ratings on Christmas Day. Broadchurch and Casualty.
Is Broadchurch still a David Tennant vehicle?
Yeah,
Is he still in that?
he's
It's coming back for season 3, or it's just started season 3?
the third season will be shown this year sometime.
Coming back for season 3.
And Casualty is entering its 30th year on television. So, some steep competition.
I've
Yeah,
been
that's-
around.
that's like their
I've been
ER.
around all those 30 years, and I've never heard of Casualty. So
It's started a large number of, British actors in general, but Who guests in particular.
Is that right?
It's just kind of one of those shows that you go and guest star on Casualty.
Yeah, it's kind of like the ER.
It's kind of like
is it a hospital?
Yeah, it's a
film or
hospital
drama?
or maybe Emergency over here would be a closer.
Yeah.
I assume Casualty doesn't necessarily.
Yeah, it's Casualty over there is not fatality. It's not a death casualty.
It's not the Army here either. Did you realize that?
I did not know
Yeah,
that.
I didn't. It
Well,
didn't occur to me until I was watching something, and a casualty is anybody that's injured in the Army. Now, in
so that's
police
what it is
lingo
in the-
or in emergency services
Yeah.
lingo here, a casualty is death.
Injury is casualty in the UK, yeah. David Tennant has been nominated for drama performance for Broadchurch, along with... Unfortunately, Capaldi and Jenna Coleman did not make the shortlist.
Boo.
No other Who-related people were nominated. Hobbit guy was.
Hobbit guy.
A Hobbit guy.
I thought you just said Hobbit guy.
No, I know
guy
who
was.
Martin Freeman is.
Nothing for Sherlock? Oh, wait, they've been off for like 2 years. So.
Oh, wait, that's for next year. Because it didn't air until
Excuse me.
2016.
I think I have the hiccups.
Oh, goodness. Another bit of news. BBC America has confirmed that they will be co-producing the Doctor Who spin-off series, Class. And it will air sometime in autumn 2016, both in the UK and the US.
So we'll be able to see it here.
Yes.
And for those wondering, yes, we will be putting that on the schedule for review purposes. I don't know yet if we'll tackle it like we do Who with a week to week, or if we'll just do
Probably do it more like Torchwood.
more like Torchwood or Sarah Jane, where we kind of lump the whole season together and give our impressions.
Because it's only
of it.
going to be 8 episodes anyway,
Yeah.
so...
That's what we're leaning toward, but things change. Who knows? Glenn doesn't change.
And tangentially related to Doctor Who, Dirk Gently is getting a new... That's my water.
That's your one.
Is getting
This
a
is
new
my water.
series on BBC America.
That's my water.
No, that's your one.
But it's not the Stephen Mangan BBC4 series, so we're all sad about that.
Boo.
Boo.
Maybe they'll bring Stephen Mangan back to play him, even though it's a new series.
I'd be okay with that.
I'd be all right with that.
He was such a great Dirk Gently.
That he was.
Okay, and our last bits of news, we have some Big Finish news of something coming up.
Yay.
Between April and June, the Master will return to the main range for the first time since October 2003.
Back up. Say that again?
The Master will be returning to the main range for the first time since 2003. So that does not include Dark Eyes, etc.
Okay.
The main range. So that means he's going up against 5, 6, and 7. Those Doctors. It's a trilogy of double discs. And we'll see 3 Doctors battling 2 incarnations of the Master.
Ooh.
So it's the 2 Masters. Peter Davison will face off against Jeffrey Beavers returning. 6th Doctor will have in a story penned by Justin Richards. I say that because I know Sean likes him so much. Colin will be facing Alex McQueen, which I'm assuming that's the Dark Eyes Master, right, Glenn?
I believe that's right.
And then the saga concludes with the 2 Masters, with Sylvester McCoy facing Beavers and McQueen. So that's really exciting. It's our first Big Finish audio multi-master story. I don't think they've done it in books either, have they?
Not to my
I know
knowledge.
Harvest of Time comes close, but it's not quite.
Can we get a multi-master story without the Doctor?
I'd be okay with that.
or what if the Doctor shows
spin-off.
up? Kind of do a reverse of the 5 Doctors. We'll just do the 5 Masters, and then the Doctor can show up for 15 minutes.
And then Big Finish isn't done there with the Master. They're going to pit Django and Lightfoot against the Master.
I hadn't heard that. I heard the other part.
Let's see.
Yeah, Alex McQueen is
Okay.
the one that's in Dark Eyes. I had to confirm that. I was pretty sure. He also starred with Peter Capaldi on The Thick of It.
Oh. I'm trying to find the...
And he was in Cinderella. The movie.
So apparently... Oh, yeah, that's right.
He was the crier.
He had a very brief appearance at the very end of the 10th Doctor, or the 10th box set for Django and Lightfoot, and will occur throughout the next run in season 11.
Very cool.
11 seasons of Django and Lightfoot.
That's insane.
That is insane. It just seems like yesterday that we were excited that there was a spin-off of it. I mean, it had already been out, but
We discovered there was a spin-off.
It was new to us.
although
It's
seasons
like
could be
4 episodes a season.
So a season, it could have started back when we were first doing this because I think they run 2 or 3 seasons in a year. So
Yeah, something like that.
still,
And there's going to be a 12th season already announced for and you can pre-order.
we need to get on that. That's all running away from us.
Yeah, very quickly.
Give us a reason to get Talons back on the Friday Night Who schedule, Sean. Woohoo! Oh.
And there's one other bit of news that we didn't talk about in advance, but I'm going to bring it up now. Recently, I don't know if anybody saw the post
You can't extrapolate new news.
on our Facebook page earlier this week. Moffat has recently come out filling some quote-unquote plot holes from Heaven Sent. Did you guys read that article?
Yeah.
I did read that article.
What did you guys think?
I'm satisfied, but I don't like when you do that.
I thought there were
When you
things
have
that
to come
didn't
out
really need
afterwards,
it.
When you have to come out afterwards. It's like the placard in the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
Tim Burton DVD.
I was satisfied
But
with the
yeah, I'm
plot holes.
satisfied,
And
yeah.
they were kind of what I already assumed anyways.
Yeah.
Well, and the one
No, because you told me you ran around the first time
Well,
naked.
okay.
I kind of That was
he
honestly,
did explicitly say that he didn't run around naked.
That was the one I had a problem with, actually. It was like...
He just put on some random dude's clothes.
Put on some... Well, where did those come from? I mean, now all of a sudden the whole thing starts to unravel if you pull at that one.
Well...
Just running around naked is like, yeah, okay, whatever.
No, because where did the soup come? Where did the food come? I mean,
well, he did
it all
the
had to be
painting,
placed there. Yeah.
Which we all assumed he painted anyways.
I don't have a problem with the clothes being there, because there were other things just being there when he was there. I had a problem with...
The Time Lord set it up for him. The entire thing is a trap and a cage for him, so why wouldn't they put random stuff in there? If he might need those.
Right. I don't have a problem with the fact that there's stuff there. I have a problem with the fact that he picks up clothes that were clearly his before. At the first time that we see him.
But it's not his first time.
But it's not his first time through the loop.
I know.
Yeah. So how is that a problem?
Because I don't have a problem with it, except for they don't explain what happened the first time. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
If it hadn't been just his clothes, I wouldn't have had a question. If it had been some random clothes that he got from somewhere else, then I wouldn't have had that problem. But it's his clothes, so that makes you go to the... Okay, what happened on the first loop?
Yeah.
Or before the loop started.
Anyways, if you want to read the fuller details of what he said, it's also in the latest Doctor Who magazine, I believe, is where all this
That's where he
came
answered
from.
the questions.
Yeah. So go pick up the newest issue of Doctor Who magazine and read all these plot holes being filled that don't need to be filled, because you can assume your own answers.
Woot.
Woot. That's it for news. Shall we move on to feedback?
Let's.
Our feedback this week comes from Chris. He says, "Hi Glenn, Sean, and Keith.
Hi, Chris.
A belated Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you all. This is actually my third or fourth attempt over the past few months to send you guys feedback via the email us form on the website, but I rather suspect that for whatever reason you never actually got any of them. Therefore, I'm going to try emailing you directly instead of using the form, and hopefully you'll get it this time. We did, Chris. We apologize that we didn't get your previous ones. We don't know what happened. I have since tested the email us tab on the website, and it worked, so I'm not sure what happened there. But we will make sure we keep a closer eye out for any emails that might be slipping through the cracks.
We're going to assume that Keith dropped the ball.
Once again, my name is Chris, and I'm a lifelong Whovian and a huge sci-fi fan in general. I had the pleasure of meeting and visiting with you all briefly following your live podcast you did at TopCon this year. Since then, I've thoroughly enjoyed listening to your podcasts each and every week. I'm also trying hard to get caught up with all of your past episodes as well. I'm now up to like episode 40. Anyways, just wanted to say hi and give a few quick comments.
And again, Chris, we apologize.
And thanks for listening. First of all, what an amazing season of Doctor Who this has been. It wasn't perfect, no season ever is, but what an improvement over Season 8. In my humble opinion, even the weakest episodes this year were better than some of the best ones last year. The 3-part season finale was so mind-blowingly awesome. If I had one major complaint, though, it would be that ever since the Day of the Doctor, we've been given this big build-up about how Gallifrey is lost somewhere in a pocket universe and the Doctor is on this quest to find it. But now suddenly it's back, without the Doctor's help, and with absolutely no explanation as to how or why. Honestly, to me, it felt like a real cheat and kind of a big letdown. Oh well, guess you can't have everything. Also, I really enjoyed this year's Christmas special. It was actually a pleasant surprise because when they first announced that it was going to be another River Song episode, I was prepared to be all underwhelmed. Frankly, from the beginning, I was never particularly a big fan of the character or her story arc. I think part of it, for me, had to do with the very obvious age difference between Alex Kingston and Matt Smith, which made River's romantic pursuit of the Doctor feel a bit awkward and even a bit creepy at times. Plus, I'd no point that I'd ever feel like the 11th Doctor had any serious romantic feelings for her. Certainly nothing like Ten's obvious feelings for Rose. but I have to say that this episode really worked for me. The chemistry between Alex and Peter Capaldi felt so much more natural. By the end of the episode, my entire opinion of River and the Doctor's relationship has changed, and now I wish we could have gotten to see more of her and 12 together. Oh, and how cool was it when he gave River the sonic screwdriver that she has in Silence of the Library? My only question now is, do the events of this episode conflict with what we see in Night and the Doctor Last Night minisode?
Keith agrees.
No, it doesn't, because they go far enough in the actual story to say those instances he backed out and wound up taking her somewhere else.
That's right.
So yeah, it technically kind of rewrites that, but
it rewrites
it in a clever enough way that I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Now for a bit of a tangent. Yes, I know this is a Doctor Who podcast, but I have to talk a little bit about the new Star Wars movie. Spoiler free, mostly.
So, we're going to mostly not sound the spoiler horn.
Because we haven't even spoiler-filled reviewed it yet.
But if you have not seen it yet, and what are you waiting for?
That was another thing I did this week. I did watch it again.
I got your text, and I don't even remember what I was doing, but I thought about it. I was like, I should go, and then we were wrapped up doing something, so I didn't. But
yeah, I went and saw it again this week.
So you're up to
2,
and you're at 2. I'm at 2. Well, now it's.
I had to catch up to you guys.
Now it's a competition.
I was shocked that it took me that long to go see it again.
Did it hold up for you?
Yes.
Just as good the second time? Even better?
Better, because then I was able to kind of focus on things. And the issue that we talked about that I had after the show, none at all.
Okay.
None at all.
The editing thing or the...
Yeah, the editing thing. It was fine.
See, because I noticed it the second time.
Something didn't occur to me.
I had the same thing after you
Something
told me your problem.
didn't occur to me until I saw it again, and I went, oh, I played that up in my head differently.
We assumed it was going to be like something else,
Yes,
and instead it
exactly.
was its own thing.
That's exactly what it was.
Maybe I just let you wind me up for it, because when we got to that point and I watched it the second time, I was really looking for it, and then I went, oh yeah, I kind of agree with him on that one. So,
and now we've done a reverse. Anyways,
I think what it is, I think after you watch it the first time, you're in that nervous, excited.
Is it really going to be as good as?
Don't let it be Phantom Menace. kind of worry, and it just kind of.
I had that more the first time,
and then you're like, no, I think that was actually pretty good. So then you go see it the second time, and you just let it wash over you. And you're like, yeah, okay, yeah.
But you don't have those inhibitions anymore.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Chris continues.
Spoiler horn. That's
spoiler free, mostly horn. Let me start by saying that I liked the movie. I honestly did. The acting was great, the pacing was good, and it had some incredible action scenes, and the special effects looked amazing. That said, I really didn't enjoy it as much as I had hoped I would. For one thing, far too many of the plot elements were lifted directly out of A New Hope. Personally, I was hoping for something, more original. Besides, if they were going to steal plot elements from somewhere, why not something from, like Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy, which was a far, far better story overall than what we got in this movie. Additionally, in trying to be a much more serious adult-targeted film, it didn't seem to have a lot of room for the kinds of lighthearted, whimsical, kid-friendly Muppet moments. Not to mention a lot of the playful banter between characters. That made the original trilogy so incredibly fun and memorable. Take the New Cantina scene, for example. Unlike the original, there was absolutely nothing about it that was either fun or memorable. I could see that about the Cantina. I don't know if I agree about the humor. He continues. Something else that really bugged me about this movie was how it totally lacked the epic feel that was such an essential part of Star Wars. People can say what they want about the prequel trilogy, but for all its faults, one thing those movies did very well was to make the Star Wars galaxy feel really big in every conceivable way. By contrast, this movie's story felt so small, so confined, the whole thing could have almost taken place in a single star system. Moreover, many of the major plot points don't make any sense or have no emotional resonance because they are given no context or explanations, and no backstory whatsoever. I could keep going, but I think you get my point. May have been a good movie, but it was certainly not without some major flaws, and far more than the few I have mentioned here. Well, this is already a lot longer than I intended it to be.
Well, we made it a lot longer.
So I'll wrap this up. But I did also want to mention a little project that I've been working on for some time now that I thought perhaps you guys might find interesting. I've been putting together a series of fake movie trailers for a would-be Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who three-way crossover story. And overall, I'm very pleased with how they've turned out. The first two trailers focus on the Star Wars versus Star Trek conflict, whereas the third delves more into the Doctor's role in the story. He's included a link to his YouTube channel. Check them out. Let me know what you think. Thanks again, guys. Keep up the great work. Your number one fan in Eskridge, Kansas, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris, our number one fan in Eskridge, Kansas.
And we will check out those trailers that you've made, and we'll make sure we include a link in our show notes to include that.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for stuff like that, so I'll have to refrain from watching it during the show now.
And that's it for feedback. Shall we move on to our review?
Let's.
The Chase. When the Doctor and his companions discover that a group of time-traveling Daleks have orders to exterminate them, a dangerous chase across time and space follows.
Dun, dun, dun.
They give a thicker description for Space Museum than they did The Chase.
Well, here's the thing with The Chase.
They had to
There wasn't as much plot.
There really wasn't as much plot to it. I give it a big dun-dun-dun. And the reason I give it a dun-dun-dun is because it's an enjoyable story. Is it a good one? No.
It's a lot of fun.
It really is.
Oh, it's not bad.
No, it's not. It's not that it's bad. I just think it's enjoyable.
What The Chase really has in its benefit, as opposed to some of the other Hartnell stories, or even some in the rest of the classic era, is that by the time you start to get bored with a place, they're on to someplace else. That story, they did a bunch of short little vignettes, not even vignettes, but that's the best word I can think of. Short, contained stories that they put them through, and it just, the trappings of them being chased is what holds it together, and that's all you need. I mean, it's so enjoyable.
Yes, I don't disagree with that.
Even the start, where it's the beginning, and they're looking at the space-time telegraph, or the space-time visualizer, and looking up things, and then sunbathing on the planet. The chemistry between them is so enjoyable, and then the plot kind of starts to slowly start going.
It's one that I feel it's a double-edged sword, because there are elements of it, like the first two parts of the story, when we're set on this planet that the oceans have gone away and we've got this race of guys living under the surface.
That's creatures, and
that's a whole episode right there. You could do a whole episode with that has nothing to do with the Daleks and the being chased. It has nothing to do with it. They just landed on the planet and this happened. There's a part of me that would have liked to have seen that story. But the Daleks have to come in and muck it all up and go, so we kind of leave all that dangling, because it could have been a two-parter, maybe a four-parter. It doesn't have to be all six.
Well, but even I think 2 is enough. I think 2 is all you need for that story arc.
And I'd have been fine.
I don't think 4 would have extended it. And we get 2 pretty much.
Quite frankly, I'm glad we only get 2 with that one, because that's my least favorite of the story arcs that we get throughout this. And I don't know that you could do much more with it, other than the fact that I wanted to know a little bit more of the backstory of what happened to the planet, but that was it. And I thought they sort of fill that in. The what's the species that
I don't even remember now. The Atlanteans.
They're on Aridius. Aridius? Is that what the name is? The Aridisiums? I guess. I don't know. Anyway,
sure.
Our apologies to the indigenous peoples of this planet.
Yeah, I think they said it's the Iridians. That's right.
Iridians.
The Iridians. And the Iridians were very uninteresting to me, and they were very, very cowardly, and they reminded me a little of the Censorites, a little bit, just in the idea that they have these elders that kind of they're like a primitive tribe, and I kind of think they serve their function in these two episodes because they find our weary travelers and they want to help them, and then they get bullied by the Daleks, and basically they're going to be eradicated if they don't turn them over. And that was enough. I mean, that was enough for me. So I think that
you mean you didn't want like a whole other episode of political intrigue
no,
and
no,
the
we
guy
got
is
plenty
going to
of
take
that.
over the council of elders.
We got plenty of that.
With that story,
censorite.
what had happened, it would have become a capture and escape sort of situation.
But
between the two groups, Vicky and the Doctor and Barbara and Ian, and between the monsters underneath the surface and the Iridians.
We got the sense rights all over again. I think it functions as it does just fine in the type of story that Terry Nation's telling, where we land and we have to we're slightly ahead of the Daleks each time. We end up landing, we get into a situation, and then we're out of there. We land, we get in a situation, we're out of there. And so I didn't want any more. Yes, it could have been, and in fact, it was ripe for that era to be its own story. But I was really grateful for the way Terry Nation built this story in the way that he did this way. It reminds me very much, and you guys haven't seen or done anything with Dalek's Master Plan, but that was kind of the idea that Terry had with Dalek's Master Plan. This is really the chase again, is what it is. This is the second chase because the Daleks are chasing Steven and Katarina for a while, and then eventually Sarah Kingdom, and so it's that same concept that's a much larger story arc because I think that's 12 episodes.
That is 12 parts,
or 12 parts, and so. It's a much bigger scope, but he kind of comes back and does the same thing, and I think that's why I like these two, because we don't have Terry Nation's first story was 7 parts, and it was
one part was whole crossing the gap.
It was a really dry, long, dragged out. So Terry got it right when he started. I mean, even Daleks Invasion Earth is kind of a lengthy
long
story, and there's more action and there's more things going on.
It's better
but
paced.
He learned that if he's going to do these long pieces, that he's going to make him he's going to make him a little more upbeat and a little more action packed.
Yeah, he's got to keep it moving.
He's going to keep it moving, and I think that that's what he did well in his last two.
Now you said that you thought it was
with the first Doctor
serviceable for what it was. And it's your least favorite part of this.
It is my least favorite.
Is that because it's so vastly different from everything that comes after?
That's what I like.
Because everything in this is vastly different. That's what I really like about this story, is the only connection to a story arc is the fact that there are Daleks and they're chasing the TARDIS crew.
See, I disagree. And Daleks are the only creatures you can do this sort of story with, really, at least at this point in the show's time. You don't need a big plot of why are they after him. They're Daleks. That's all you need. They want to exterminate. They want to kill these people who have stopped them twice before, and so they have a time machine and they're going after them. That's all you need.
A perfect world for this story would have been one episode with the Iridians, one
Each
story with
on
the what was the second place they went? Was that the Terror Journey into Terror?
The Flight Through Eternity is episode 3.
What was that one?
Well, eventually,
New York City.
Part of
okay.
Part of 3 is New York. Yeah.
So it should have been New York, and then it should have been I just they spent far too long on Iridius.
See, I agree with that. Maybe that's the problem.
I think that had they shortened that, then you would have had the same amount, nearly the same amount of time each one, and it would have been.
See, I rather like that at part 3 we have the 2 locations in one story, because there could have been more drama for the Mary Celeste, but for New York it was kind of like, well, this is a fun little gag, and then we're on to the next. Okay, now we're almost in peril, and then we're off again.
Yeah, what they should have done.
I don't think those 2 could have been individual episodes.
That's what I think should have happened. Is they should have done they should have done Iridius and then Empire State, and as an episode, a whole episode.
See, I don't think they could have
Mary
sustained the full
Celeste.
episode.
Well, I think that's ultimately what Terry came down on too. As he went, I can't drag this out for a whole 22 minutes.
I mean,
but I think it would have felt a little. It would have been paced off better. But yeah, that's my least favorite. I enjoyed it. It was fine. I didn't want to know anything more about the Iridians, though. I was done with them. I was like, okay, they serve their point. That's
See, I think I come down on it. It feels to me like because it's so different from all of the rest of it. All of the rest of the chase is we land, we're in peril, we escape. We land, we're in peril, we escape. Whether it's a comedic one on New York's Empire State Building,
the Mechanoid two-parter at the end, it's kind of like
it's a stretch.
Bookended. Well, I mean, you're beneath the surface and then above the surface.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like they just
above and then beneath.
Yeah, above. No,
they were
below
above
it, below and then
no,
above.
they were below the surface and then they went above to the city.
The city was above?
The city was
in
on
the
stilts.
Mechanoids. I'm sorry. I was back on
and it's kind of reversed in Iridius.
Yeah,
they start above.
That's
and
true.
Then
I hadn't
below.
thought of that. That's
so
a good point,
it
Keith.
kind of bookends the whole thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't considered that.
The fun stuff in the middle.
Well,
because
quite frankly, I wish they would have shoved everything back and did Iridius for one episode and Mechanus for 2 episodes. Is what I would have preferred.
A full Mechanus with the Mechanoids.
Yeah, they did do 2. Yeah, you're right. They did do. But one of them is them
jungle Mechanus, and
one of them is them trying to escape the doppelganger doctor, which
that was fun.
It was fun. The problem with this story overall, the fun of it is they jump from spot to spot. I like that because it really feels like single episodes as opposed to stretching a story out over 4 or 6 that we get in a lot of classic Who. Space Museum is an example of one that wish it had only been 2 episodes. It felt way stretched out. But I like the way that this was just jumping from here to there, and we had just little pieces of things. But the Mechanus, the city of the Mechanoids was the most interesting to me. That's the one I've always been most fascinated in, so I wanted more of that. But that's a quick capture and escape as well. So,
and I agree with you there. I think that's another one.
That's the one that could have been fleshed out the most for me. Also.
While I feel like, and I think this is kind of, and honestly, for me, this is kind of a problem that I have with Terry Nation, is I think he comes up with some fantastic ideas that then all get overridden by the Dalek plot. Because if we're going to do a story where the Daleks are chasing them, I want to do Dalek chase story, and I want that bit in the middle. I want that to be the stuff. The stuff at the beginning with Iridius, I really feel like, even if it was only a 2-parter, could have been an old standalone thing that the Daleks didn't have any part of. And the stuff with Mechanus, that could have been expanded out into a whole 4-part episode with exploring the Mechanoids and what they were doing,
where they came from,
and giving us a little bit more of that and the threat that these things were. Because instead we get just the nuggets of information that Steven throws at us, and then the Daleks show up and there's an epic battle and everything blows up and we got away. And it's honestly, I know because I come down completely on the opposite direction of this from where you guys did, but it's the same problem I had with Keys of Marinus. Keys of Marinus set us off on a quest, and we're going to go bump, and then we didn't. We wound up dawdling in one place and having a whole other story arc somewhere else, and I just went, that's not what you promised me.
That was a Terry Nation one.
It was a Terry Nation one, so that's why I think I have a problem with that. Now, I will say, we know this is the chase now. This was not known as the chase back then.
No.
This was just happened to be 6 episodes that were strung together. So maybe he didn't even intend to book it. Maybe that was a happy coincidence that he went, I could book in this with another 2 episodes here at the end, and that would be kind of cool.
Well, I don't know. Even from that point of view, though, he knows he's writing 6 episodes, so he still could have gone into it going, okay, my first episode's going to 2 episodes going to be this, and my last episode is going to be this, and he was conscious of the book ending because even though it wasn't set out to be one story arc, it's obviously been put together because it is Terry from beginning to end.
Right.
So, my problem with this is I think Terry's story is really good. The acting is subpar in this, and the direction is horrific. And I think the acting would have been a lot better had the directing been better. I was
impressed with some of the camera positions early on, and then it kind of spiraled
and I don't
out of control.
I don't even mean that. I mean
directing of the actors.
Yeah, it's the directing of the actors. It's not tight enough. Now, I'm fully aware that Bill Hartnell was having issues, especially with his lines. And it wasn't until this is probably my 3rd or 4th viewing of this. It wasn't until this one that I could pick up on the lines that William Hartnell was dropping, and I could pick up on the lines that Ian Chesterton or William Russell was picking up. It was real obvious that, that line was supposed to be William Hartnell's, and William Russell ended up picking it up and just going with it. And fortunately, Hartnell being such a good thespian that he is, he played along with it and would just fill it in because he was aware that he forgot that line or he didn't finish a sentence, and so Ian picks it up.
And nowhere is that more painfully obvious than the one scene at the beginning of the Funhouse episode where they're discussing what to do.
Yeah.
And everybody kind of pauses for a minute. And Hartnell starts to talk, flubs it, realizes that he's flubbed it, and then rattles off the rest of his chunk of dialogue all at once, is almost just to get it over and done with, and then stops and goes, "Let's check upstairs."
Yeah.
And it was just like, wow.
So that's
that
where
needed to have been reshot.
That's where this story comes down, is the fact that it's poorly paced in its acting. The story works, but it's just there's a lot of stopping and looking around. There's this lot of pauses where there shouldn't be pauses, and somebody having to pick up where they go. And then that was the one that I was going to bring up, was the fact that William Russell can tell, he just says, "I'm going to power through the rest of this," and that's what he does.
I wonder how much that might have been coupled. I mean, obviously he was starting to have more and more issues as time went on, but I wonder how much of that was also coupled with the fact that knowing that this was going to be the exit story for Ian and Barbara.
He was bothered by that.
And because he'd already lost
distracted with it,
Caroline Ford.
Yeah.
And that
Susan.
That he was going to lose more people. So
that could be.
I wonder just how much of that was preying on him at the time that they were going through it. And
I wonder how early they knew.
Yeah.
One of the things that pleased me the most about watching this time is apparently Hulu has the British broadcast version, because I got to see the entire Beatles clip. That was the first time that I've seen it. Now, I've seen it on YouTube.
Yeah, I had to go look it up on YouTube.
But this is the first time that I've seen it. I was watching this, and Holly was in the room, and I was like, and I stood up, and I was like, just kind of aghast. And she goes, "What's wrong?" And I said, "This is the first time I've actually seen this in the context of the story." And she says, "What are you talking about?" And I had explained to her that in the American version of this, they didn't want to pay as much, the astronomical cost it would have to put the Beatles in there, so they cut that scene. And I said, but in the UK, because copyright works differently, they don't have to pay as much. That is intact in the British. So I said, Hulu apparently has the British broadcast version of this, and nobody knows it because I just watched it on my American television.
I didn't know that was a thing, because I assumed that they had shot it and they wanted to use it, and then they couldn't come to terms with it and just cut it out altogether. I didn't know that it actually even aired with that.
It's actually there. And when they went to release, actually, I believe the American VHS version has it on it. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until they went to clear the rights for the DVD version that they realized they were going to have to pay so much. So it's only the American DVD that they omit the Beatles scene. And
no wonder the YouTube version I saw was not the best quality.
The DVD in the UK actually still contains that scene because, again, copyrights laws are a bit different there, and so they don't have to pay as much. And so
I wish I would have known.
I
wish I would have known that
being a
Friday night.
Beatles fan. Yeah,
I got to the end of it Friday night, and I thought, wait, weren't the Beatles supposed to be in that? So I went and fast-forwarded through the first 3 parts, because I knew I didn't watch it that night. I knew they weren't there, so I went and fast-forwarded through the first 3 parts, and I'm like, no, I don't see it there. What? I had to go look it up online.
When they're looking through the Time TV, that's when that comes up.
Way to invent a television set, but make it bigger. With a smaller screen. What is it? It's a TV. It's this big.
Anyway, I don't want to tip anybody off, but Hulu in the U.S. has the clip that's probably not supposed to be there, but who knows?
Maybe.
How was the quality on it?
I'm quite pleased with that. Look great. It's just
the UK
just as good as
if they've released it on DVD in the UK. They probably
I'm sure they vid-fired that and remastered it and everything.
Yeah.
So it's
because I think I've only seen the grainy YouTube or. I think I owned this one on VHS,
it's probably
which is where I caught it.
The one on YouTube has probably been lifted from the VHS version.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, that's an interesting
so
side.
I was
a field trip.
Very, very pleased to stand up and go, what? It's all there. I'd never seen it in context to the story. It was.
So is it a replacement segment, then, or is it additional?
It's additional, right? It's the end of the whole thing from the impression I got from the YouTube clip I saw.
I can't remember because I haven't seen the American version. It's right after the. It's right after the Elizabeth I segment.
Shakespeare.
Yeah. And
Because that's the last video segment in the American version.
then
think
they
so, yeah.
see. Well,
And then they
no,
land.
they see something else. Oh, they see the Daleks.
No,
Well,
it's
Vicky
after
sees
they
the
land.
Dalek.
Oh, that is after.
Or Barbara sees the Daleks.
After
She
they
goes back
land
in,
already.
after they've already landed.
So they were originally, each one got to choose something to look at, and Vicky chose the Beatles.
Yeah, so it's not even that it's... so it's just that we have a shorter version of
Yeah,
it.
it was just- it's
the
just
first
short.
episode
That's
shorter.
my thought was too. Had I been watching along with Friday Night Who, I'd
You
have
would've
gotten
been
behind
off,
you guys because I have been watching the Hulu copy.
Interesting. Having nitpicked that, I enjoy the chase parts of this.
Well, and even talking about Hartnell and the Funhouse part, that entire story was so much fun, of them being terrified in this Scooby-Doo type mansion, and then find out it's literally a funhouse of a haunted house attraction was so great.
I know why it
and
was
Daleks-
closed though, because that Frankenstein monster animatronic was just a little too violent. I mean, if it was
apparently
picking kids up and slamming
apparently
them on the
wandered
ground like it was doing
upstairs
those the Daleks, then yeah, we're probably. Of course, the kids probably weren't shooting at it, but had it picked any kids or adults and slammed them down on the ground, that's probably why it's closed.
It makes you wonder what these attractions were built out of. That they were able to withstand a Dalek death ray. And
Well,
not melt.
I mean, Dracula just came out and back, and
Does
out and
it
back, and that
say
was more...
and the phantom woman on the stairs too that does the yell and then
the ghost.
yeah, but it doesn't say anywhere on that sign what year it is, right?
No, it
and
doesn't.
they never allude to what year
It
it
just
is.
says it costs $10
So,
to get in.
I have to say that it might be in the future when things are a little more impermeable.
Or the Dalek death rays aren't as powerful as we think.
Well, it makes me wonder if
He just
the
has to be a
Dalek
robotic
death rays
Frankenstein
are.
monster.
Well, my first thought was maybe the Dalek death rays are only
Set to organic.
well effective on organic.
Yeah.
But you have to throw that out once the Mechanoid battle happens because
Maybe-
they blow the heck out of the Mechanoids. So
Here's a bit of retconning for you. Of because of their encounter with the Frankenstein monster, they adjust their weapons so they
for organic,
can.
and it doesn't affect the mechanics.
Yeah, and so
Okay.
then they tweak it so it will affect mechanics when they meet the Mechanoids later in the story.
Okay, works for me. I'm sold.
You can explain anything away. Almost. That whole bit I really loved. That was probably one of my favorite parts, aside from New York and Milton Dill.
Milton Deal from Alabama.
Yeah.
What I meant was, what year is it? They have different years.
Different years in London.
What year is it in Alabama?
I had told. I think I knew going into this that Peter Purvis was in this story, and once we got there, I had forgotten at that point. And then
He's in it twice.
And then then when he shows back up as Stephen, I can go, "Oh, that's this story. Of course it is."
It was so cool to see that after talking to him
Yeah.
at Time Eddie.
Yeah.
And just, he was such a hoot in this. And deserving, I think, of a little place in history for surviving the encounter with the dog. After laughing at one.
No.
That he survived his encounter with the
Yeah.
dog. He wasn't just blasted into the ether. And I don't know if you saw on Friday, I have a petition now that we need to start for Stephen Moffat. We need to get Peter Purvis to come back in New Who as Morton Dill. His present age.
I wish we had asked him to do a Morton Dill impression
We should
for us.
have.
I wonder if he could still do it.
But he has spent the last 50 years in an asylum. He's been locked up, and he's now convinced himself that what he saw was in fact a hallucination. All the doctors are right, and they're releasing him. And he comes out the stairs, and he stands there for a minute, gets a good breath of fresh air, and looks across the street, and the TARDIS dematerializes. And he turns around and goes back inside.
That'd make a great little
That's it.
like minisode. that
Oh,
you would
yeah.
put on
Yeah.
That'd be hilarious.
just that's it. Oh, Morton.
I like when Doctor Who explains mysterious events in history as well. So the Mary
So the Mary
Celeste
Celeste was
is
nice.
brilliant because for people that don't know, the Mary Celeste was found. It's an American sailing ship that was found by a Canadian crew, deserted, and the lifeboat was gone. and it was missing one sail, I believe, and the captain's wife and child were on board. And I love that this goes so far to explain that that's what happened to the crew of this ship. Was they were chased off by Daleks.
What did you think of the Dalek humor that was peppered throughout this? The one Dalek emerging from the sand coughing, and the really bad. What's the word I want to use? Gritchiness of the one Dalek who was in command, is kind of barking orders. The other ones, we're going to go do this, and everybody just kind of stood there for a minute. And he's like, "All right, go ahead, go, do it." And everyone's like, "Oh, okay." And then the one that was gurgling and stuttering,
like, yeah, we had a stuttering Dalek. I had never noticed that until this viewing.
But no wonder you guys are losing.
Sometimes Daleks forget their lines too.
Maybe it was a bad clone batch.
Yeah, the Marinus, the city on Marinus, the elevated city with the Mechanoid, or not Marinus, Mechanus with the Mechanoids has always been one of my favorite pieces of this story, and just
and it would have been so fascinating to see how the jungle underneath played into the city, like exploring that kind of dynamic a little bit more of the Mechanoids up here and the organic below, and the conflict almost between them. They could have fleshed that out more, I think.
Yeah.
Well, and at what point this is, I'm going to kind of tip my hand a little bit toward the adversary part of the archive of this show, but at what point did the Mechanoids, who were sent down here to terraform the planet, go, wow, killer fungus, we're just going to leave the lights on and we're going to build a city on stilts? Okay.
Yeah.
We're not going to actually terraform anything. We're just going to build a city on stilts. It doesn't look like... It doesn't look... It looks indigenous to the planet. This was not built by Mechanoids.
No.
They probably kicked whoever was living there out and took over the treehouse.
Well, don't you sort of get the impression, though, from just the dialogue in this story that did they send the Mechanoids ahead of the crew? See, I get the impression. Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So there was no crew. It was when Steven's crew went to find out what was going on.
Then he crashed, but I mean, it's still it's because one of the things that I always appreciate is when the production, and we've talked fairly highly about Doctor Who production values in as opposed to some circles. One of the things that I always appreciate is when you're doing a science fiction thing and you take that production logic step with, okay, if the alien's going to look like this, the city should look like this. You don't just put a rectangular doorway in because they're trapezoid-looking beings. So you make trapezoid-looking doorways. Stuff like that makes sense to me. Skaro in the Daleks, with the fact that the doors scroll open and they're all kind of... You'd have to wedge a Dalek sideways through the door, but it's the same shape.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me in a certain... There's no way the Mechanoids built this place. Those hallways are just narrow enough for one to roll through, and they have to wait and get somebody. They wouldn't have built that. That's not logical from a robot
But if they're programmed to build it
for
humanoid species,
that's the impression.
But it didn't look like a humanoid city either.
The Mechanoids come to this planet, and they realize that it's going to be colonized by humans. So they realize that the planet is inhospitable for humans. They have the job of terraforming this planet. But they have humans that are coming. So the first thing we do is we build a city on stilts so that humans have a place to live, while the Mechanoids then are later to go down and terraform and do further their work. But something happens in the programming, and they become corrupt and hostile. So they end up living in the city that they built for the humans. And... You're right. It's not very human-friendly either. But again, that was just more of a scientific overthinking design.
I will buy the logic of that statement, but not the production of that statement.
Not the design.
I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a beautiful city. It's a cool design. It just doesn't fit any of the elements of the story.
I could see...
Unless there was a fungus people that were living there and the Mechanoids kicked them out. I would have liked to have seen that story.
I could see humans living there. I didn't think there was any problem for humans living there, door-wise or hallway-wise or anything. So
we wouldn't have built that.
We wouldn't have, but the Mechanoids think that's what's right for the humans. So.
Maybe
they also keep us in cages and feed them bananas.
Yeah.
I get the impression that maybe there's the key. Maybe they were building that as a zoo. So whatever animals that they trapped, they would put into this city, and it would become a zoo. And so the idea was to study the animals that were on the planet ahead of the humans coming. So they already had an idea and a database and a knowledge of the indigenous species of the planet. So they build cages, and they have bananas, and because there's obviously slats on this for viewing, and so that's the idea, is that they're going to trap these animals. So when the humans come, they've already built a database of the indigenous species on this planet, and so that's why it's built in such a way that it is. And then, of course, the corruption happens, and when Steven crashes, the specimen that they have is a human, and they throw him in the animal cages. So. Well, they obviously gave him a bunch of lumber as well, because he built a jungle gym.
Or they thought they were going to have apes in that. And
I can't decide
what kind of ape.
I can't decide if Steven is the best kind of companion to pick up at this moment or the worst, because I'm trapped in a zoo, and they gave me hammer, nails, and a bunch of 2x4s. So I built this. It's like, you couldn't have built a battering ram, or you couldn't have laid the 2x4s down and prevented the mechanoids from getting back in the room, or you could have tripped them, could have built a push stick and knocked them off the railing. I don't know. Come on. No, I built this.
I love the fact also that one of the stumbling blocks of this is that Steven's been there for 2 years. Now, maybe it took a good part of a year and a half to build stairs to the roof, but he's been there a good part of 2 years. And it's not, Ian walks out on the thing and goes, well, we can use this cable to lower down the side. We can just pull it out of this wall. And Steven says, I had thought of that. Ian stepped out after being here for 10 minutes. You took 2 years to figure this out? I mean, or were you just saying, oh, yeah, I thought of that because, you hadn't, but you had to make it look like you were smart.
In fairness, Ian also almost walked right off the edge of the roof when he got up there.
And Ian did make the point that it was going to take more than one person to yank that the lead cable out of the that.
I'll buy that, sure. The over engineering award goes to Steven's Jungle Gym. You didn't see me because I died laughing so hard when he said, they gave me that. I built this. And he's so proud of it. It's just, dude, you built the Jungle Gym. I mean, again,
he's got to keep fit.
If the kids come over, I want to be able to point to something in the backyard and go, I built this. I would be justifiably proud of that too. I'm not knocking it, because if I were to knock it together, it would not look that grandiose or grand, and I'd probably
I didn't think his looked all that grandiose.
Well,
it looked like something I'd put together.
It was sturdy.
Yeah, well.
I'll say that because if I'd climbed up to the roof, it would have fallen apart, and I'd still be up there.
Sean, if it's any consolation, I would have climbed up anything that you built.
Case in point. But yeah, I laughed so hard at that. That's one of the things that I think is what's so much fun about this is that
there is a lot of humor.
Even with the plot failings, there's a lot of humor that carries this.
Even if it's accidental humor.
Even if it's accidental. And that's why the story is so much fun to watch. Even going back to the Iridians, there were moments of genuine humor. Now,
of Vicky getting after Ian to run, and then Ian getting after Vicky to run. That whole interchange was great.
I don't know at what point in time our companions took the stupid pills. Because we're going to pull on this ring, and she's freaking out about, no, don't do it because the door will open. He's like, and he pulls on the ring and breaks it, and then the door opens. Well, let's go downstairs. Let's go downstairs, like without even talking about it. It's just like, ooh, and she helps her down, and then he climbs down. It's like, you guys never watched the show? There's something bad in the basement. Don't go down there.
Ian should know long enough. He's lived the show.
Vicky, I can forgive. She's still new to this. Ian should know better.
At least Barbara didn't touch any seeds.
Take that a step further. When the doctor in the funhouse, when the doctor and Ian are upstairs and they unveil the lab, and the doctor's headed down the stairs, Ian even hesitates. Is like, no, I don't think we should go down there. So at that point, he realizes it's not good to go down into a room you don't know where you're going. But then they go downstairs.
Then the doctor turns right around.
The doctor goes. Oh, the best is when the monster sets up, and the doctor doesn't even say anything.
He just turns around and flees.
And Ian
leaves Ian behind, and Ian's still sitting there looking at the monster.
And you notice the way Hartnell delivers the line. He's at the top of the stairs, and it's almost an afterthought. Chesterton.
He gets halfway. He pauses for a couple of beats too, and then he says, "Chesterton,
Come on, get out of there." So yeah, those moments work so well.
And Ian's line shortly after of "Where's your sense of adventure?" I went away with that flock of bats that attacked.
I love that when these come up with the theory that we're inside the human mind.
what a high-minded idea!
Yeah.
And you're thinking the first time you see this, you're thinking, "Oh wow, we're doing another like mind robber type thing."
Where it's
that. Like, oh wow, what does?
Is this a line
where
of
are
fiction?
we?
What's going on?
Yeah, what is going on here? And then, because they hadn't done it yet. They hadn't even engaged the Celestial Toymaker at this point, which is a little bit of a kind of a high-minded idea as well. So yeah, but you first time you see this from our perspective, you're going, "Oh wow, that's how are they going to pull this off? This is weird and kind of high-minded." And then when they leave and it pans down to the funhouse, it's like, oh.
What was so great was
which makes
watching.
more sense because the Daleks, I don't think, could be there if
well,
it was.
It's funny because it's just after they have the conversation of being in the mine and being safe. The Daleks can't come here, and they cut away to that open room, and the Daleks show up, and then you're going, the Daleks have figured out how to get into the human mind.
It's so great watching the Twitter reactions because everybody's tweeting along and having a good time, and then all of a sudden we let into the funhouse, and everybody goes silent for about 5 minutes, and then Keith's like, "Please tell me they're in the land of fiction." And right after that, Herbert,
I am Dracula. Oh, come on.
right after, that opened the floodgates, and everybody was like, "What is going on here?"
So I'm Scooby.
I wish I had been there.
I had the benefit of, because I've seen this one before, but it's been so long. So when we broke last week and officially ended after part 3, I confess I didn't stop. I kind of rolled on a little bit, and I wound up watching almost all of part 4 before I finally gave up and said, "Okay, I got to get some sleep because I work tomorrow." So I was very fresh on it and knew the twist of what was coming up. But just sitting there watching everybody going, "What are they doing? What's with the Scooby-Doo stuff?" And just really almost getting to the breaking point of, okay, the story's lost me now. And then hitting that reveal, and as one, everybody going, and you could hear it. It was audible. It was so great. And that's, again, it's one of those moments that works for such a goofy thing that shouldn't. It does when you really tack that on there.
I think I'm going to add that to my Halloween watch list next year, though, since it has Frankenstein's monster, Dracula.
There you go.
You got to. The first time I saw this episode, I was giddy. I was like, I don't know how this is happening, but I love this.
Well, the stuff that Ian and the Doctor share when they figure that moment out on the stairs, and they think they're safe, and they come on down the stairs, and then whoop, and they skip over that last step with the creak because they know what's going to happen. And this is, the chemistry there is so good.
Yeah, that's one great thing about this story is the Doctor and Ian get some one-on-one time to really shine, and Barbara and Vicky get some time together to shine too.
Well, and it's
then
nice
you get early on the Vicky they split them up individually in pairs well enough that you get nice bits for chemistry throughout the whole thing.
Great. And it's not that it's necessarily a new template, because they used to do that obviously when Susan was around, that she would pair up with Barbara.
But it's so slightly different because Ian has been around for so long.
Right.
So has Barbara.
And it's nice to see Barbara pair back up with somebody now and have those kinds of moments again that she hadn't had for a while.
Yeah. And like when they're laying on the beach, and what's that horrible noise? Oh, am I singing? What? It's just that sort of close relationship that they have with the Doctor now. Yeah. It's so nice to see that.
Well, and it's almost fitting and sad too at the end when they decide to tell him that they're leaving.
Yeah.
And the Doctor goes into that whole they go back to that whole argumentative crew that we had so often in the very beginning. And it's almost fitting but also a little bit sad because they were just, reveling in the fact that they had defeated the Daleks and everybody was happy, and Ian was congratulating the Doctor for defeating them once again, and which, in my opinion, Ian did just as much as the Doctor did at defeating the Mechanoids. But although the Doctor is the one that set off the device that blew the thing up,
which blew up
with
one
Steve
Dalek
in it.
He blew up one Dalek.
Well, I guess you could say the battle probably caused the fire.
yeah.
But I got the impression that the fire spread.
Yeah.
That the Daleks and the Mechanoids were kind of hindered by that in their battle. And I think the battle looks fantastic. I like how they were so limited on how to shoot something like that, so they resorted to the whole superimposed shots and to get the action and the feel that there's this epic battle happening. The only thing that I had a problem with, and again, we don't always poke on production, but was the little cartoon explosions.
Oh, no, see, that was right in there. That was right. Right part of that.
I'll allow it, but
And I liked Ian and Barbara's departure.
What do you think of the still frame montage at the end of that?
It was a bit different, but it felt very much that time.
Yeah, I agree. And the first time that I saw this story, I really liked that. I really liked the choice. The more I watch it, the more odd it seems to me. And I don't know what it is. I can't really put my finger on it. But you're getting... We rarely get to see the aftermath of Return. And so that was kind of a nice way to do that. But it's almost... It's so drastically different than anything we've done in this story, or even before, that it's just... It makes me think of clip montages from sitcoms back in the 1960s.
It had that feel to it, yeah.
So
I think it works maybe because it's Ian and Barbara. I mean, we did not get a clip montage when Susan left.
That was also a bit more somber.
A bit more somber. And
I'm going to give you a spoiler. We won't get a clip montage of Katarina leaving because it's going to be like this. And that'll be the only clip you get. People that are listening is going to see what I just did. But
you can imagine.
And then of course all of the rest of the companions that go. It's like you said. It's very rare that we kind of get to find out their travels with the Doctor are over. You're now off the show, so to some extent we don't care about you any longer.
Or sometimes like Dodo, you don't even get a goodbye.
Yeah, you're off camera.
He's completely off screen.
But I think maybe because they were there from the beginning, that this felt a little more needed. And I don't know. I ship Ian and Barbara. I liked the fact that we
helps lead to that them being together after the fact.
The other thing that I really like is that we come full circle with the giant TV, and that they get a visualizer moment of the fact that the Doctor is aware that they made it back and they're safe and they're okay.
Yeah.
And that I needed. It helped forgive the tantrum. Mm-hmm. That if he was...
Because he tries to couch the tantrum in, I'm not going to support a suicide mission because you can't control this thing.
Well, and I like...
Although, interesting that he was the one that ran out the door to go confront Robot Doctor.
Right.
We're not really thinking of if this doesn't work and they fry me, they're stuck.
Yeah. I like, too, that he does make the mention at the end that he's going to miss him. And it's just that was well done. I really like the way that's done. And
I like the way that Vicky underplayed it with just coming up and putting her hand on him and kind of patting him and then guiding him out of the room to kind of, let's go, we've got stuff to do. And Joe didn't make a big deal out of it, didn't make a speech, just okay.
It's at that point that you really feel that Vicky gets the Doctor, that she's made this really good connection, and I love the idea that when he's saying, "Are you going to leave me too?" And this is earlier on when they've announced they're leaving, and she says, "No, of course I'm not going to go back to their time. I mean,
what would I go back to ancient Earth for?"
So it was fun.
And then poor Steven. The last we technically saw of him was running down an exploding corridor with Panda Bear in hand.
Yeah, but we know where he's at.
But we know.
Well, what was he going back after?
The panda.
He going? Okay,
the panda.
Which I did not realize.
Does that help now? The whole panda.
Yeah, it really does. I kind of
Time Meddler later.
Hop right into Time Meddler after watching that episode Friday night.
I did not get that was the panda.
Same panda. Yeah.
Like I said, I've seen this, but it's been years and years and years, and
it's so interesting just now having it in context.
It wasn't until he introduced them that I went, "Oh, that's the chair. That's the panda."
You guys, back in the day, you guys talked about the randomness of the panda in the chair, and I said, "It won't be so random once we get to another story." And I think is what I told you.
I think you're right.
Now it's not as random.
But I couldn't give it away because I wanted you guys to get that satisfaction of, oh, that's where the panda comes from.
I was very satisfied. I did not realize that was the thing.
Yeah.
Enjoy that one, Keith. You don't get many of those anymore.
That was a long payoff, too. How long ago did we do Time Meddler?
Forever ago.
Forever ago.
Well, that brings us, I think, to the meat of the archive.
Yes.
Let's talk Mechanoids. Aside from their odd zookeeping habits and poor building choices, what do you think of the Mechanoids, Keith?
I want more of them. Because honestly, there hasn't been enough. I think it was Dan tweeted out that it was either Dan or Mike had tweeted out that they were just. Oh no,
it was James.
James tweeted out that they were just nearly to the awesome level of the Quarks. If they were just a little bit cuter, they would be much cooler. Well, the problem is there's not enough Mechanoids in the stories. The most Mechanoids we get is in the Juggernauts. That's the bigger problem with this archive.
Yeah, I think the first comic that we did was The World That Waits. I think that we get a pretty even dosing.
That's a good amount of
Mechanoids in that one. It's not until we get to The Eve of War and Impasse. And for anybody that doesn't know, the World That Waits was a TV comic back in the day when they were doing the Doctor Who television TV comics. They were also doing Terry Nation's Daleks, which were Dalek stories that they would do as well. They had the rights to do as well. And these are framed around there's no Doctor in these whatsoever. And so the first one we did was from the TV comic story, The World That Waits. And I can't place where this chronologically would have been, because the Daleks don't know anything about the Mechanoids in the chase. But at this point, clearly they are engaged in a war. Or is this one where they sort of kind of have they just re-arrived?
I'm trying to pull it up now.
Yeah, I can't remember for certain on this one. But anyway, there's a lot of the same trappings of the little abbreviated battle we get in the chase is sort of here in this comic as well. It's almost like this comic reimagines that battle between the Daleks and the Mechanoids all the way down to the city burning and collapsing.
Yeah,
so
it really
this
is
is
kind
almost
of
that piece without
repeat.
it's even talked about the light source being controlled by the Mechanoids at this point. And so it really kind of fleshes out to me the battle of those Mechanoids and the Daleks maybe a little bit more. It even talks about the fungus plants on the surface, and I think it imagines them a little better than they did in the production of the story. But you can do that with a comic book.
You didn't dig on the giant toadstool?
Well, yeah, I think the toadstools were kind of cool too. I like how the one has plucked the one Mechanoid or the one Dalek from the ground and brought it back, and then turned it against the other Daleks.
That was a nice touch.
That was kind of cool. But Sean mentioned it earlier, and that's what this boils down to. Is he says he felt like this was a little more of a Dalek
Adversary Dalek archive.
Somebody trying to weasel more Daleks into an archive, but I think the concept of this raging war between the Daleks and the Mechanoids, I've always been kind of fascinated with.
It's kind of cool that Terry Nation decides to flesh it out in the comics. And then it almost feels like he revisits the entire idea with the Mavellans later on.
Yes, I think you're right.
It's kind of like, that kind of worked. I enjoyed that bit in the comics, so let's bring that to television.
Would you like my theory? The Mavellan, or the Mechanoids, realizing that their ridiculous design flaws are not going to beat the Daleks because they can't fit through doorways, engineer the Movellans as their super weapon, and the Movellans pick up the fight and continue on to be the Dalek killers.
There you go.
Yeah,
I like
works.
that. I think the thing that's most quite interesting to me is that Terry Nation invents the Daleks, who are these little blobs of aliens that are in these Dalek casings that don't really seem very suited for any sort of battle or environment. And then he gets another chance at inventing another
And he makes a
monster. And he makes just a larger, bulkier version of a Dalek.
a ball version of a Dalek.
Yeah. But I've always kind of liked the look of the Mechanoids. I think it's it's a stylized, futuristic look.
Well, I also
appreciate
like
it.
how the voice is different than
Yeah.
a Dalek voice.
Agreed. And did anybody, when they were reading these comics, hear the Dalek voices when the Daleks
yeah,
talk, and the Mechanoid voices
The
when
font
the
is so great.
You had to read it a little faster to get through it, but I imagined that the Mechanoids read or spoke these lines much slower than they do read in the comic book as well, because they say a lot more in this. But if you'll notice during the battle in the chase, the Mechanoids are saying long strings of things, so it's not outside their purview. But I quite like this. What I really like was
the story also sorry.
Go ahead.
Placing wise, it feels almost like the Mechanoids obviously built a bigger city than what we had, and it's the Daleks coming to get revenge on the ones that were.
That's what I was
killed.
trying. That's how I was trying to place this, because that's what it seems is that
Because
they've come to avenge the first wave of Daleks. I can kind of imagine that this is maybe a wave of Daleks that the Emperor sent to find out what happened to the other Daleks.
Yeah, I could see that totally.
However, this must be. I presume they've either rebuilt the city,
Or expanded it.
or this is a different city somewhere
Well, that's
else.
possible,
That there are
too.
several Mechanoid
Yeah,
cities,
I
still
didn't think of
cities
that.
on the planet of Mechanus, and this happens to be the one they come to in this one. So, but it seems the Daleks get the upper hand in this one this time and fly away, not realizing that there's still a Mechanoid, at least one Mechanoid still alive at the end. So. The next two comics that we reviewed were Eve of War and Impasse. And Eve of War, if I remember, was the Daleks were creating a space station, right, above the planet of Mechanus. And they're almost preparing...
space station above Skaro.
Skaro. That's right.
Yeah.
But they're preparing... Well, they're preparing for a battle against the Mechanoids
Because
if
they're
one
going to
happens
go
again.
and they're going to use the space station as their orbital
battle station.
departure point to launch
Right.
the offensive. That was a hard word to get out.
And the Mechanoids kind of have the upper hand without the Daleks knowing it. The Mechanoids have sent a scout battle ship ahead to Skaro, and they're bringing the battle to Skaro, unbeknownst to the Daleks. And I thought it was interesting that it's revisited the idea in a different way of taking over, using the mind cloud stuff in order to cloud the Daleks' sense of what's going on and making it appear that the Daleks are his enemy, and using kind of
I really like
subterfuge
that aspect,
within the station in order to basically use a Dalek to fight other Daleks.
Yeah.
And, of course, the Emperor Dalek figures this out.
Just in the comic production, these are in color. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but the bumper design of the Daleks is much larger than what it is on the show, which makes me wonder if these are supposed to be movie version Daleks.
They do look like
yeah,
movies.
they do
And-
In fact, look at
they got the
ear eye stalk. Or not the eye stalks, the...
Which now makes me
Ears.
wonder if this entire series is set in an alternate continuity.
It's quite possible. I think they used what was popular at the time, and the movies happened to be very popular at that time.
I find it interesting that the Emperor Dalek almost looks like the Davros Dalek thing that he's in and later on.
It is. And, in fact, that's the same design I think they used in... Not Evil of the Daleks. Evil of the Daleks. That's the Emperor design in Evil.
There is,
Oh, so that's a
there's
that is a
precedent set
previous...
for that.
Yeah, there is a precedent set. Anyway, so
Not sure I'm a big fan of
we
the
get kind
design,
of
but-
just a little bit of a skirmish in this particular story arc. The next one's my favorite, Impasse, because I love the idea that there's this kind of United Nations type entity that knows that that the Daleks and the Mechanoids are going to go to war, and they're afraid to get caught in the middle of it. And so they designed this robot, which is called the 2K robot, to infiltrate both factions is the idea, to try to prevent the war between the Daleks and the Mechanoids. And the entire story follows 2K, who almost has more of a humanoid personality.
He's like Boba Fett.
He really
He's
is.
awesome.
He is. And he does infiltrate the Daleks, and he's captured, and he escapes. But in the escape, he ends up going to Mechanoid and convincing the Mechanoids that the Daleks weren't necessarily coming, or they were coming to destroy the Mechanoids, but decided against it, ended up saving the Mechanoids, and the Mechanoids believe it. And they're like, but the Daleks will never be our friends. They'll always be our enemies, but we won't go to war with them now because they have essentially, although the Daleks really, in truth, were just trying to save themselves because K2 had set the device against them. So I really like that. I like the hope from being from the perspective of this lone robot that comes in and through sabotage ends up stopping and thwarting the war. I thought that was quite enjoyable. A lot of fun.
It's just a shame that the Mechanoids don't show up till the very end.
Yeah, the Mechanoids aren't in this much. In fact, it isn't until the 2K robot goes to Mechanus that we do finally see the Mechanoids. I think there's a couple of shots in the setup, but beyond that, that's pretty much all we get in that story. So, but the Mechanoids are in it, so that's the important thing. It's part of our archive. Do you want to move on to the last story, or do you guys have anything else to say about the Impasse and Eve of War?
Just briefly, I wanted to share a tweet that Endless Mike over at the Time Scoop podcast shared with us. He joined us for Friday Night, and he comes on and says, "Sorry I disappeared, was writing first chapter of a fiction with Frankenstein, a Mechanoid, and Absalom Dak fighting Daleks." Mike, I expect regular progress updates on this. I have to read this thing. So
That's cool.
The last one is a short story by Justin Richards in the Cult of Skaro book. And this is the one where the Mechanoids are killed. The final resistance of the Mechanoids at the final stronghold, and they're destroyed. The Mechanoids are only in the first, 3 pages.
Now, did you take it as the actual end of the Mechanoid menace, or
took
was
that
it just
impression.
a Mechanoid stronghold?
Well, it says this is the final stronghold of the Mechanoid resistance. So who knows if it's referring to just this specific planet or the entire universe.
I didn't read it as entire, but
I
guess it could be.
Maybe it's just that one city.
That could be.
We just determined
Another
there's already
city,
further cities.
If anybody's going to kill them off, I'm okay with Justin Richards doing it.
Yeah,
And in this setting, too, because what the story really is the origins of the Cult of Skaro. Which is where the story gets really high marks for me. For that aspect of it. Just low marks for the Mechanoid aspect. Death of the Mechanoids.
I like that finally somebody kind of took on the origin of the Cult of Skaro. I'm kind of glad that they did it in this way because it's not overdone, but it really gives you a good sense of why these particular Daleks
since you're following the
Dalek
lead.
Sec.
Yeah, Sec, yeah.
So I thought that was kind of cool. And especially that they set up Dalek Sec's story, and the rest of them, it's just mentioned that they were the best in their field, So, starting this out on Mechanus as the final volley against the Mechanoids, I thought was neat, and a neat tie-in to the Mechanoids, bringing them into New Who in such a way that even though it's expanded universe, gives them a little bit of a footing into the new series.
And it's one thing for Terry Nation to write TV comics with Mechanoids in them. It's another thing for another author to bring them in.
Yeah, agreed.
In such a clever way.
As the Juggernauts brought him into later classic Who and Well, at least in the Big Finish universe. Sean, you really kind of you tipped your hat to us earlier in the week when you texted about reading this. Well, I think you'll have a lot more to say about this than we will.
I've not made my love of Justin Richards stuff secret by any stretch of the imagination. I've enjoyed just about everything we've read from the guy. And so just to find that this was in this, basically a children's book.
It really is.
An info book.
A
reference book.
But what's interesting is that the story does not read like a children's short story. It's not aimed at kids at all. I mean, it's got some big words. I had to look a couple of them up, and it reads like a Doctor Who story, which was great. I love the fact that while the Mechanoids, depending on which side you're going to come down on, did or did not get their due at the beginning of the thing, doing an origin for the Cult of Skaro was, I didn't know that's where we were going with it until we got to that point.
Yeah.
And then went,
which is funny because it's called Doctor Who Files number 11, The Cult of Skaro.
Yeah, and it's a story called Birth of a Legend.
Yeah, it should have tipped me off to that. Did not. I like the fact the Emperor, we're there at that moment when the Emperor sets it up and says, your job is to go and think of the things that we can't think of because we're not programmed to think that way. Go do something different. And the fact that it's, in a way, sex story. That he's...
SEC.
Sects story. That he's the one that, is fighting the Mechanoids, and he's the one that's I'm going to say
he's chosen to lead.
He's the one that's chosen to lead them and do all this kind of stuff, and he, tragic in a way that we know the downfall of Sec later.
Well, they even go to explain the idea of the black casing, which we hadn't seen since the classic series.
Yeah.
The Black Dalek being the commander or leader of particular groups of Daleks. So. Yeah, I quite enjoyed this. That was a neat little treat.
But it was just it was. I read this one first.
I did too,
and wished I had read it last.
Yes, me too.
Because it was the perfect cherry on top of that whole thing, especially ending. If, as Keith points out, maybe this is in fact
if it's the
end of the Mechanoid menace. Until Davros, being Davros, brings them back.
It's funny too, reading the stories that we read. You kind of when you're reading a story about two Doctor Who monsters or villains, essentially pitted against each other, you sort of have to. Now, obviously, I'm going to come down and root for the Daleks, but it's the Daleks' story, and they're really written in a way that I think maybe that's why I like the 2K Robot so much, is because it takes you out of having to pick one of the sides to root for. It gives you a middle ground in order for somebody, a hero in the story. But it's interesting when you read the other stories, you have to pick a side. And I personally went with the Daleks because, number one, I like them, and number two, you're more familiar with them.
Yeah.
And so... But the Mechanoids, the Dalek, when you think about it, the Daleks came from kind of a nefarious beginning and start, and they're almost more of a threat than the Mechanoids are from the whole perspective of everything. Because while the Mechanoids kind of lost their way based on their programming, they originally came from Earth. They were designed by the humans to be helper robots. The Daleks were built as war machines, but you find yourself being on the side of the Daleks when you're reading these stories. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy there.
If we're going to go to the extent that if this batch of Mechanoids on Mechanus that wound up kind of going off reservation and became the foundation because they're self-replicating and self-repairing and all this kind of stuff. And this was where all future Mechanoid interactions come from, this group that we get at the end of the chase. I am surprised that it took them so long. And what I mean is, it's a robot that's designed to be self-replicating, self-repairing. It's a helper droid, and as the wonderful intro that we got that talks about their versatility, that they can terraform, that they can do this, they can do that, they can do all of these things, and they're infinitely adaptable.
They make coffee.
They should have been able to mop up the Daleks in about a month and a half.
Because put them in a strong stalemate.
As we've seen,
well,
the Daleks have one plan. That's to go in and smash things up. And it never works. And the Mechanoids should have been able to, after one, maybe 2 or 3 encounters, adapt and come up with something different. And so we kind of get those pieces in these comics with, a mind ray and we're going to take over one and we're going to do this. And and then all of a sudden when you get to Justin Richards and maybe they just bit a little too hard into the 2K Robots peace initiative that's just like, oh, well, okay, well, we'll leave them alone. And then obviously the Daleks came back and smashed them at the beginning of the Justin Richards things, and that's what did them in, is they were too trusting. But on paper, this War of the Gargantuans probably should have gone to the Mechanoids.
Yeah, that's true.
And certainly true. So there you go. There's another Adversary Archive. This time the Mechanoids. We do seem to be digging for... but I felt like we needed to get it in, especially when, whether it was inadvertently or inadvertently, got the Mechanoids onto the schedule 2 weeks in a row. I thought, we gotta do this now. So
I would love to be able to take credit for it, and as originally scheduled, it would have been phenomenal. And yes, I would have taken credit for it. Then some changes to the schedule happened, and it wound up being a happy accident because I'd forgotten that the Mechanoids were in the Juggernauts.
Or the Juggernauts, yeah.
And then it wasn't until Glenn went, oh ho! I see what you did there. And I went, what did I did?
I did. I texted him and I said, I see what you did there.
So there was that.
Or I think I said, the Mechanoids? Oh, you're clever.
It was planned, and then it wasn't. So it went from being awesome to a happy accident. I'm still going to come down on the, God love Terry Nation for continuing to try to top the success of the Daleks with yet another ridiculously designed robot that kids are just going to love to play with. And
whose voice is harder to imitate.
Yeah, no lie. Couldn't understand... Follow. That was really the only word that I think I got out of them. But
English.
I suppose if all else fails, you can throw your Mechanoid toys at your friends when they disagree with you over who's winning the war. It's got to hurt a little bit with those.
That's in the box set, right? There's that first Doctor box set.
I think you're right.
The Dalek, a Mechanoid, and the Cyberman.
There is a Mechanoid in there, yeah. Big bulky block, 20-sided die-looking thing.
Why isn't there a Chumbly?
All right, Sean, what do we got coming up on the schedule?
Coming up on the schedule next week is Delta and the Bannerman, starring Sylvester McCoy, for Friday Night Who on the 15th. And that leads us into our episode next week, which is a return to the Beyond the Doctor series. For those of you that have been listening to us for a while, you will remember that the first part of last year we were doing shows kind of showcasing each actor that has played the Doctor in a role outside of Doctor Who. So for Sylvester McCoy, we've chosen to do Dracula, which is the 1979 Frank Langella starring vehicle, but Sylvester McCoy's in it. I don't know for how much, but we'll find out. And so we will kind of discuss that and the impact, and kind of a little special bit, I think, for us, since we've met Sylvester McCoy, and kind of have that insight on him as well, a little different. Then we will follow that up with The Claws of Axos with John Pertwee the following week. We've already reviewed that story, which will open up our episode number 265 for our spoiler-filled book review of Lethbridge Stewart, The Beast of Fang Rock, by friend of the show, Andy Frank-Mellon. We'll also cover the short in the Lethbridge Stewart stories, The Cult of the Grinning Man, and then we'll catch up with some Titan comics with the 10th Doctor stories that are out and about. And I believe as of right now,
season 1.
We should be able to finish off season 1 and go up through, I think it's issues 11 through 15. And then Scream of the Shawcut for Friday Night Who, which will lead us into some other things that are coming down the pipe. And, of course, schedule is posted on the website, which you can go to if you would like to follow along with your homework at home.
That's www.travelingthevortex.com. And on that site, you can also find some links to some stores. Amazon link there. If you're doing some shopping and you want to click through there, that'll help us in a small way. A percentage of anything that clicks through there that you buy goes back to this show. And we want to thank Ben, who recently made some purchases through there and gave us a heads up. You can also shop on Entertainment Earth just by clicking through that link there as well. And then, of course, we have, which I think is most of our financial support, because all of it 100% goes back into this show, is Patreon. So if you're a subscriber, thank you very much for subscribing to us on Patreon and helping support us that way. If you're not a subscriber, go ahead and please check it out, and hopefully you'll do so. We're also on the various forms of social media, which include...
We are on Facebook, Traveling the Vortex, Twitter, @Travel Vortex. We have the Goodreads Book Club, Traveling the Vortex, just search that on Goodreads. Google Plus, other various forms of social media, and of course, if you want to send us feedback, you can send it to feedback@travelingthevortex, or like Chris did, or you can hop on the website and fill out the form, and it should come to us.
We believe it's working.
Yes.
All right. Is there anything else that we need to touch on?
Just a note in regards to the book club, I went out and picked up my copy of Legends of Ashildr, which is the January book for the Traveling Vortex Book Club, so I will be jumping on that momentarily now that I have finished my reading assignments for this week that did not feature the Mechanoids for our Mechanoid archive.
I read the first story.
Got a whole bunch of Daleks for our Mechanoid archive.
There was Daleks in the first story of Ashildr too, so...
Oh, really?
Good luck. Yeah. No, there's not.
Picking up a theme here, Glenn.
All right, if that's going to do it for this week. Until next week, I'm Glenn.
I'm Sean.
I'm Keith.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.
Be seeing you.
Thanks for listening.
And that. I was late.
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.